Donald Trump's national security advisor, Michael Flynn, resigns less than a month into the job amid media pressure over his alleged ties to Moscow. An aide to French presidential candidate Emmanuel Macron accused Russia of hacking into their campaign to influence the country's upcoming elections, but stopped short of providing evidence for the claims. Declassified CIA documents reveal a legion of military-trained psychics who worked for U.S. Army intelligence. We asked New Yorkers to try and interpret some of the drawings they produced.
What do you think this drawing is?
A shower.
All right, what about this one?
I guess it's something from outer space.
Let's go with the 7-year-old son's class drawing.
They hired these people who said they were psychics to try and come up with a plan.
And they wasted money on that.
Watching RT International live from Moscow, I'm Marina Joshi. And we start with the U.S., where the White House has confirmed President Trump's national security advisor, Michael Flynn, has resigned from his post after less than 1 month in office. RT's Ganich Chikan has the latest from Washington.
All of this started with anonymous officials telling the media that Michael Flynn had discussed the Obama administration sanctions against Russia with the Russian ambassador to the U.S. weeks before Trump took office. What exactly the two men said to each other, we the public still don't know. Initially, when asked, Flynn said that the phone calls were not about sanctions. Vice President Mike Pence and other administration officials reiterated Flynn's account. General Flynn then came back to the media to say he wasn't certain. Tonight, he wrote this.
In the course of my duties as the incoming National Security Advisor, I held numerous phone calls with foreign counterparts, ministers and ambassadors. These calls were to facilitate a smooth transition and to begin to build the necessary relationships between the president, his advisors and foreign leaders. Such calls are standard practice in any transition of this magnitude. Unfortunately, because of the fast pace of events, I inadvertently briefed the vice president-elect and others with the incomplete information regarding my phone calls with the Russian ambassador. I have sincerely apologized to the president and the vice president, and they've accepted my apology.
Over the past several weeks, Trump's now former national security advisor has been under tremendous pressure from the press and from Trump's opposition, many of whom were desperately looking to find a connection between the Trump administration and the Russian government.
Tonight, confirmation that President-elect Trump's national security advisor, General Michael Flynn, was in contact with the Russian ambassador to the U.S. U.S. investigators are scrutinizing late December phone calls between Mike Flynn, President Donald Trump's national security advisor, and Russia's ambassador to the U.S.
Trump's national security advisor could be in trouble over a phone call he made before he was on the White House payroll.
Anonymous sources telling the paper that U.S. counterintelligence agents are looking into communications Flynn is said to have had with Russian officials.
There was, figuratively speaking, a target on General Flynn's back way before the phone calls happened. Before Trump was elected, the former head of the Defense Intelligence Agency was blasted in the U.S. media for his appearance on our channel, where he discussed the fight against ISIL. He was blasted for accepting an invitation to RT's anniversary gala in Moscow, where the Russian president was also a guest. Add to that Flynn's apparently not seeing Russia as an enemy and his perceived amicable attitude toward Russia, and you could see how he became the target of many speculations here.
A mainstream media alleged that Flynn's telephone conversation with the Russian ambassador could have violated the so-called Logan Act legislation introduced all the way back in 1799. However, there have been no prosecutions under this act throughout its more than 200-year history. The Logan Act was aimed at preventing private American citizens from negotiating with foreign governments over diplomatic disputes. Despite that, numerous such meetings have taken place with politicians in previous U.S. administrations with many consequences. And back in 2008, even then presidential candidate Barack Obama went on a massive foreign tour during his campaign. Well, here you can see him sitting down with Iraq's Prime Minister While still a candidate, Obama also met Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas and Israeli President Shimon Peres while he was in the region. Besides the Middle East, he went to Europe to meet with Chancellor Merkel in Germany and then French President Sarkozy. And he also held talks with British Prime Minister Gordon Brown. Let's now bring in Kamal Alam, military analyst at the Institute of Statecraft. Thanks so much, Mr. Alam, for joining us here on RT International. First off, why do you think we see such selective accusations? We just showed our viewers Obama's trips as presidential candidate, when not even elected, didn't lead to any consequences, but Flynn had to resign over a phone call.
I think there's a whole history behind this. There was definitely a targeting of General Mike Flynn. It's not to do with this particular phone call with the Russian ambassador. It has to do with Flynn's whole challenging of U.S. foreign policy in the region. And that's why he was forced out of the White House when he was director of the Defense Intelligence Agency. He fundamentally challenged the way American intelligence is run. And he's no stranger. He's probably the most decorated military intelligence officer of the last 2 decades the Americans have had. And he said there's something wrong with U.S. intelligence policy. So once he went against the grain, he became a target for the so-called experts in Washington.
Well, you said once he went against the grain. Also, it seems like whenever there is someone on the political arena in America who expresses positive attitude towards Russia, immediately becomes vulnerable and a target for establishment attacks. Why is that?
I think there's obviously a massive lobby in the part of Europe and America which do not want any cooperation with Russia. Well, actually, the thing about Flynn was he was head of the intelligence of JSOC, Special Operations Command in Iraq and Afghanistan. The Russians helped NATO fight the war against terror in Afghanistan and also helped NATO move their supplies to Central Asia through the Northern Distribution Network. So he was very much someone who saw on the ground how the Americans and the Russians worked together to fight terrorism. And he said that Russia should not be an enemy. The bigger enemy is radical Islamic terrorism, and that's why he was called out for it. He continuously went at loggerheads with the White House and the US President Barack Obama, and this is why he's paid a price, because the think tank community, who don't really have much ground knowledge, went against him.
Well, he said he paid a high price, yes, but should he have really resigned over this then?
I think he's a man of principles, and that's why he resigned. If it was someone else, they wouldn't have resigned. But at the end of the day, he didn't want the American president and the vice president to be uncomfortable. He did make a mistake, and his big mistake was he lied to the vice president. He apologized for it. I don't think he's resigned because of his contact with the Russians. He's resigned because there was undue attention being brought to the White House at a difficult and sensitive time.
It did say that there was a fast pace of events there. But just looking at what you said earlier and all that anti-Russian hysteria, could what we see happening at the moment be just part of pressure on Trump to make him change his attitude towards Russia?
Most definitely. You know, his Secretary of State, Tillerson, will face the same problems. They've accused him of being very pro-Russia. Anyone who wants to work with Russia on international security is coming under the microscope. And I think it's not just limited to Flynn, but with Flynn in particular, because he was probably the best generation, definitely is the best general of his generation. He was targeted. People forget Henry Kissinger went to meet President Putin in the last year and a half. And Kissinger is no apologist. He went to meet the Russians because even now, Kissinger is seen as a godfather of U.S. foreign policy, believes you've got to respect and work with the Russians on all kinds of security aspects. You cannot ostracize the Russians if you want security in the Middle East and in Central Asia. And unfortunately, there are massive numbers of people in Washington and Europe who disagree with that. And anyone who says they want to work with Russia are paying the penalty for it at the moment.
Well, if there's so much hysteria and paranoia in American establishment towards Russia, I mean, how can the ties between the two countries be mended?
I think that's going to be the big challenge Trump now faces in the next month, because with General Flynn gone, he's lost a massive pillar of his foreign policy and defense policy. Because let's not forget, before Flynn joined Trump's team, Trump didn't really have a chance. 60% of the military veterans and a lot of the people from the US military services and retired people voted for Trump because they saw Flynn as their hero. And with Flynn gone, it makes it very difficult how they're going to work with the Russians, because Trump has been accused of being pro-Russian, so is Tillerson, so all the daggers are drawn, and it's almost like McCarthyism again, whereby there is paranoia rather than rationality when it comes to dealing with the Russians in Western policy circles.
Well, with General Flynn gone, who do you think could be the next political victim of this anti-Russian news hysteria?
I mean, the Democrats are going all the way for the president. You know, there's all these talks about, was the US president involved in this? Was Pence involved in it? This is a cover-up, and Flynn's taking the first hit. And I think, again, you'll see Hillary Clinton tweeting yesterday. A lot of this is just very petty politics and, you know, being very childish. It's not actually perhaps to do much with Russia. It's more to do with domestic US politics and a failure to realize that someone who was not expected to win the elections has won. So a lot of it is they're jumping on the Russian bandwagon, but then anyone could be next. It could be Tillerson, it could be the president, the education secretary, who has nothing to do with Russia. You know, she's also under the microscope. There's almost an insurgent opposition politics happening now. When you see the education secretary who was barred from going into a school in the Washington area, that has nothing to do with Russia. So there's just there's a left-wing destructive opposition amongst the Democratic Party who are going out against anyone that Trump wants. It's not to do with Russia itself, but of course Russia is used as a scapegoat for anything that's going on in the White House at the moment.
All right, Kamal, thanks so much for talking to us here on IT International and giving us your thoughts on this issue. Meanwhile, following media reports of Flynn's alleged connections to Russian officials, the hashtag #FireFlynn has been trending on social media with people backing his resignation. Leader of the Democrats in the Congress, Nancy Pelosi, even published a damning statement calling for Michael Flynn to be fired. RT's Kate Partridge looks at how associations with Russia have become something of a sin.
Now we have a national security advisor who cannot be trusted not to put Putin before America. As long as Republicans refuse to compel the release of President Trump's tax returns, they are complicit in covering up Russia's financial, personal, and political hold on the administration. Vladimir Putin's grip on President Trump must be investigated, exposed, and broken. National security demands that General Flynn be fired immediately.
Putin before America, Russia's financial, personal, and political hold, Putin's grip on President Trump. Well, his notion that cooperation with Russia is a good thing hasn't met much wider appreciation.
Well, I respect a lot of people, but that doesn't mean I'm going to get along with him. He's a leader of his country. I say it's better to get along with Russia than not. And if Russia helps us in the fight against ISIS, which is a major fight, and Islamic terrorism all over the world, right, major fight, that's a good thing. Will I get along with him? I have no idea. It's very possible I won't.
Putin's a killer.
A lot of killers. We got a lot of killers. Why, you think our country's so innocent?
Extraordinary criticism and pressure on an administration that's less than 4 weeks old. And it's not just the Democrats and the media who are so fearful of Moscow.
I would consider the principal threats to start with Russia.
Russia today poses a danger.
Russia has reasserted itself aggressively.
While other European countries who think an olive branch from the West to the Kremlin is the way forward are treated skeptically by mainstream media.
You who talk so profoundly about valuing the sovereignty of France surely must have a view on the violation of the sovereignty of Ukraine and the annexation of Crimea.
There was a coup d'etat in Ukraine.
That's what you think?
Yes, it's not just my opinion, that's just the reality. There was a referendum in Crimea.
After the invasion and the annexation. Yes.
There has never been an invasion of Crimea.
It seems like being friends with Russia is seen more as a sin than a sincere plan of action.
An aide to French presidential candidate Emmanuel Macron accused Russia of trying to hack into their computer system and database in an attempt to swing the elections. For more, let's now cross live to RT's Paris correspondent Charlotte. I apologize. I earlier spoke to Charlotte Dubensky, but here's what she said.
There are hundreds, if not thousands, of attacks on our computer system, our database and our sites, and by chance this happens to come from the Russian border.
So far, Mr. Ferrand has provided no concrete evidence as to those claims to substantiate those hacking claims being claims from Russia. And Russia itself has distanced itself from these claims, describing them as being absurd.
There can be no question of any official involvement of Moscow in these attacks. Any accusations of Moscow's possible involvement are absurd.
Now, this is not the first time that Russia has been accused of being involved in hacking. Now, last month, US intelligence agencies released a report of unclassified documents suggesting that Russia had been involved in hacking the US election in 2016. Now, that report itself didn't provide any concrete evidence of those claims, and it even said in the report there was a disclaimer about that evidence and the eligibility of it. Now, the US intelligence agencies themselves can't even agree on what sort of confidence they have in this report, with the CIA and the FBI saying they have high confidence in it, but the NSA saying it has just moderate confidence in that report. There were also claims from Germany that Russia had been involved in spreading misinformation about the country's Chancellor Angela Merkel. Now, there has actually been a year-long investigation into those claims of misinformation being spread, and the security agencies in Germany have released a report saying that there is no reliable evidence to suggest that Russia was involved in those allegations. Here in France, where these latest claims have emerged, experts are saying that Emmanuel Macron needs to actually be clearer about his own policies and where he stands as a centrist politician to lay out his agenda for this election. His policies are seen so far as being the natural successor to François Hollande, France's very, very unpopular president.
Politically, Macron is a true successor to François Hollande. We are absolutely sure that if he is elected in May, French politics will remain the same as under Hollande, with the same tendency towards European extremism or Europeism, with the same type of austerity, with the same measures against the middle class, and the same types of law, such as the labour law. He is a continuation of Hollande.
A batch of declassified CIA documents have revealed the agency's dealing with paranormal is now official. According to the files, the organization, over a span of 20 years, used a team of military-trained telepathic individuals. The program, codenamed Grill Flame, was established in 1975 and began as a research into paranormal abilities. But its star turn came in 1979 when dozens of Americans were taken hostage inside the U.S. Embassy in Iran's capital, Tehran. The telepaths were used to provide information on where people were being held and to report on their state of health. And these are the pictures of the scene where the hostages were located, drawn up by the psychics based on their remote viewing abilities. RT's Caleb Maupin asked people in New York how they interpret the drawings.
Now, you'd have thought that the CIA would use the most advanced, cutting-edge methods and tactics available. High-tech surveillance, satellites, sleeper cells, double agents, and people who claim that they have psychic powers.
We don't fight with guns, we fight with our minds.
Holy. Pictures showing the psychic's visions, like this one, were also produced. Now, if you take a look at it, it's not exactly clear what's going on here. We decided to ask New Yorkers to use their power of mind to decipher this one. What do you think this drawing is?
A shower.
All right, what about this one?
A room with, holes that are holding, yeah, some kind of a ceiling, and this is the structural beams.
I guess it's something from outer space.
That's what you think of?
Yes, yes.
All right, and what about this one here?
A prison.
I'm going to give you A, B, C, and D. and you can guess which one it is, okay? Is it A, the plans for a nuclear reactor? Is it B, the sketches of the floor plan of the White House that Donald Trump's staff gave to him? Is it C, a secret CIA program? Or is it D, my 7-year-old son's homework assignment?
D.
Let's go with the 7-year-old son's class drawing.
I think I'd go with D.
I would say some kind of floor plan for maybe Donald Trump's floor plans.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go with Donald Trump's, what the White House drew up for it.
Ready for the answer?
Yeah, what is it?
The CIA started a program, a secret program, option C, where they hired psychics to try and come up with a plan to rescue the hostages. Psychics, people who said they were psychic.
The CIA came up with that.
They hired these people who said they were psychics to try and come up with a plan.
And they wasted money on that.
I think they could use their money a lot better way.
Odd. Just plain odd.
Yeah.
No, that's ridiculous.
The CIA project, employing people who claim to have psychic powers, continued until 1995. 26,000 psychic missions were carried out by the CIA. 277 people who claimed to have psychic powers worked with the CIA, all at the expense of the American taxpayer. Up until now, this has been kept top secret, and you don't have to be a mind reader to guess why. Caleb Maupin, RT, New York.
Well, retired CIA analyst Larry Johnson says that in America, many agencies often throw good money after bad when lacking results.
I'll call it the bureaucratic imperative. Large bureaucracies like CIA, like State Department, like Department of Defense, when they're faced with a crisis of some sort and they don't have a ready answer to it or a quick and easy fix, will oftentimes be encouraged to literally throw money at a problem and do anything because it's considered a high priority. And by making something a high priority, people are no longer have to worry about being held accountable for what they're doing. And I think that's exactly what took place here. It was absurd. It was a waste of taxpayer dollars. I think this was an example where the CIA, for whatever reason, maybe watching too much television, thought that this would actually produce something. And in the end, it didn't produce anything.
Watching RT International, more news will be coming your way after this break.
People with stories to tell. Those who deserve to be heard. Studied inside out, but still with unrevealed secrets. Leaders, politicians, thinkers, and witnesses. They're here to speak. Are you there to hear?
Most people think to stand out in this business, you need to be the first one on top of the story or the person with the loudest voice or the biggest ratings. In truth, to stand out in the news business, you just need to ask the right questions and demand the right answers. Question more.
Welcome back. You're watching RT International. A Facebook post by a Swedish policeman has caused an outcry after the officer claimed it was now mostly migrants involved in violent crime. Peter Springer is a veteran officer who works as a senior investigator. In his social media post, he recalled all the crimes it handled in just 1 week, including rape and violence against police. He then pointed out that while Swedes were among the perpetrators, the majority of the crimes on his list were committed by migrants.
We have to spend a lot of time on serious violent crimes, and this is happening all over the country. I've noticed there's an overly large amount of immigrants carrying out these very complex and seriously violent crimes. It is this question I want to bring up and discuss.
The officer's comments sparked uproar across Sweden, with headlines in the media claiming he's now being investigated for hate crimes. However, when we contacted the prosecutor's office for comment, we were told no probe had been launched against the policeman and no decision's been made yet on whether to investigate him. Meanwhile, the officer in question has gained a lot of support, with a Facebook group Stand Up for Springer rapidly gathering popularity. And he's also been supported by migrants. One of them even delivered flowers personally to the officer, while the policeman himself says he's always been positive about immigration. He says the problem actually lies with the Swedish government.
Of course, this is about crimes by both Swedes and immigrants. Sometimes it sounds like all crimes are committed by migrants, but this is absolutely not the case. This is specifically about the overly large amount of criminal immigrants that are performing serious violent crimes, something we didn't see 10 to 15 years ago. This is also a big problem for other immigrants. The immigrant community is trying to start a new life in Sweden and has the right to do so. I've always been positive about immigration. I've never had a problem with it. What I have a problem with, if anything, is the police, the government, and people are asking questions like, can we really take care of everyone?
While Europe and America are still coming to terms with Brexit and Donald Trump's election triumph, some aren't so surprised by what's happened. James Woodhausen, an international forecasting guru and professor of innovation, has a knack for making some rather precise predictions. He foresaw both Brexit and the victory of Donald Trump. We decided to ask him what he thought about some other important issues.
Now, a lot of people are worried that Trump's victory will sort of have a domino effect across the globe, and particularly in the EU. People are saying the presidential election in France is going to be the next big test for the EU. And I know you've said yourself that you think the EU will fall apart within 2 to 5 years' time.
The breakup of the EU, I think, is quite possible, not just because of the elections, but because the EU is a fundamentally unstable apparatus economically. The problem is not that Trump is going to be copied by all these strong men and that all these French electors or Dutch electors, I'm half Dutch, are looking, oh, Trump, he's the way to go. No, I don't think that's the case at all. It's to do with the well-founded feeling of people, not just in the Midwest of the United States, but all over Europe, who believe the EU is not Europe, because it isn't. The EU is not very democratic. They're always telling us to change our opinion. This doesn't mean that they are pro-Trump or pro-Geert Wilders or pro-Le Pen.
Do you think these allegations are fair?
I think it says more about Hillary Clinton's bad politics and her lack of popular support that she blames her defeat on the Russians. Well, people don't have very many political solutions right now. I think this is clear with Mr. Trump. We need a more rational critique of him.
If the politics do change in Europe, do you think those sanctions against Russia will be lifted over Ukraine?
Putin and Trump are apparently getting on a little bit, and they've had a phone call and so on, but the sanctions are still on. Right? That's new. I don't have an explanation in a hurry, you know. I think perhaps the reason is that the West has invested so much in anti-Russian feeling that they will have a cocktail with Putin, get on with Putin, but still keep the sanctions on. And probably Putin won't be very bothered.
Next on RT International, it's Boom Bust discussing the future of markets under the presidency of Donald Trump. And for our viewers in the UK and Ireland, it's Larry King Now. Just stay with us.